Get started. As a heads up, I know that you guys have been going through a lot of classes and you've been seeing a lot of stuff already. So I apologize. This is going to be a pretty heavy topic, but we're going to try to have some fun with it. We're going to go through it together, and hopefully it'll be a really enjoyable time, and we'll have a great time talking about something that's honestly pretty heavy topic and even sometimes a pretty weighty thing in our world. I got a question though. Where's everybody from? Give me some places that you guys are from. Just yell them out. Florida, okay. Somebody else from Florida? What about you here in a white t-shirt? Fort Lauderdale, okay. Oh, my man, Chicago, I see you. Where else? I heard New York somewhere. Is there anyone not from the U.S. here? Anyone that's not from the U.S.? Okay, we're all from the U.S. I saw another hand over here real quick. Yeah. L.A., nice. Cincinnati, oh, that's close to home too. We're from Chicago. That's close to home. Well, we're going to jump in. What we're talking about is being united in a divided world. A lot of the things we'll talk about are things that we see here in the U.S. every day. But as Charlene will really point to, man, these are situations, there's things similar to this. Everywhere you go in the world, you'll see these types of things. So what we're going to talk about is these social constructs that are built into our world that can attempt to divide us. Is there anybody who knows what a social construct is? Cool. Well, we're going to define this in a really simple, basic way. Basically, we're talking about these things that exist in our world, in our countries, in our states, in our cities, that you see commonly. Sometimes the people in those areas don't necessarily even agree with them, but they're so heavily a part of our culture that they constantly exist. We've seen many of these for hundreds and thousands of years, and we may see them change shape, but they still seem to stick around in our world. I'll give you a common example, one that we hear all the time in the U.S., and that's racism. Basically, these divisions based off of our race and where we're from or the color of our skin, whatever the case may be, is a heavy social construct. What are some of the social constructs that you guys could think of? And I know we don't have a mic out there, so I'll just repeat whatever the answers are that I hear. Social constructs that you could think of, things that are in our country that can divide us. Yes? Okay, opinions on abortion. Yeah. Financial, yeah. Where you are financially in this world definitely separates us. Right here. Sexism is a huge one, your sex or gender. And I'll even add with that one, and again, we're not talking about what's right or wrong or what this thing or that thing. We're simply talking about what are the things that divide us. Even how you identify or how you choose to express your sex is a huge thing that can divide us now. I saw another hand over here. You were going to say what she said? Okay. I saw a hand in the back. Yes. Either one. Religion? Yes, religion can be a huge thing that divides us. Politics, huge. That's what I was thinking of when someone mentioned abortion. That definitely falls under the political realm. But how we feel in our opinion on different things, even who we support politically, can be a huge thing that divides us. You guys said many of the ones I have. One that we didn't mention, and probably because most of us are from the U.S., if not all of us at this point, is tribalism. That's a huge thing that Charlene has shared about where she's from, where the country is divided into different tribes. Even though everyone is Kenyan, everyone is black for a good huge part, not always, but in the area she grew up in, the tribes separate the country in a huge way. Segregation, which for many of our cities, if you're in a major city, you probably have something like a Chinatown or a Greek town. But our cities are oftentimes divided in a way where people from certain cultures or areas or backgrounds live in a certain area. We may be segregated based off of our financial situation or our social situation. And that socialism is one. Once somebody mentioned something like that, like what our status is, where we are, definitely affects us. Sexism, politics. These are things that are a part of our culture, that are in our world, that we see every day, that have the temptation to divide us, if we allow them to. Want to tell you a little bit about my story and my background and kind of my experience with this world around us and how these things have affected me. I grew up as I think someone mentioned earlier or asked me about earlier. I grew up in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. You know, in the area I grew up in, everybody around me was black. I didn't know anybody who wasn't black for a good chunk of my early years in life. Not only that, we all were in the same financial status, right? Everybody around me was broke. Nobody had excelled or anything like that. We all were on the same level. So a lot of these things we're talking about didn't really affect me in my early years. In fact, I heard about things like, you know, racism and prejudice and all of that different stuff, but I didn't even consider them because in many ways it didn't affect me. The only thing I knew, and I kind of laugh about it when I think about it now, when I pictured white people or other people of other cultures, from what I knew, they just didn't seem like they had problems. All I knew about them was what I saw on TV. And if they did have problems, it takes about 30 minutes to an hour, and somehow they figure it all out. It didn't seem like I couldn't relate to their situation. I didn't understand it. Well, as I got older, my family decided that they wanted to move to a safer area, a nicer neighborhood. So 10 of us, my family, me, my brother, my sister, and my mom, 4 of us, moved in with my aunt and uncle and their 2 kids, and my grandmother and grandfather. So all 10 of us moved into one house because that was how we could afford it, in a neighborhood that was an all-white neighborhood. And when we moved there, I had 2 distinct experiences almost immediately. One, I got a lot of friends that were from a culture that I wasn't used to. I had a lot of friends that were white. I had a lot of friends that were at a different economic status. And we were cool with each other. We had a lot of friendships. I had a lot of people that I got to know that were in this different status, these different people that I had never met before. Equally, in the area that we lived in, there were a lot of people that didn't want us to be there. In our house, believe it or not, and this may sound like it should be like the 60s or the 50s. This was actually in the 80s and early 90s. People would break stuff on our house. We had these statues, and they broke them completely into pieces because they didn't want us there. We had a long black picket fence that went around our house. Someone wrote along one of the long sides, the sides that pointed to the main street, that said, "Go home," then the N-words. They wanted to make it clear they didn't want us there. One of my scarier moments, I remember coming home from school. I played sports, so oftentimes I would be at school later in the evening, and I had this roughly about a 3-4 block walk that I had to take to get home. And a large amount of it was along this street that it was on a busy street, but separated from the busy street, and there weren't a lot of lights, or I don't remember if there were any lights over there. So it was a fairly dark walk that I had to walk. And one day I'm walking, and there's this guy behind me, and I see him walking, and he's a little weird, but he's not, you know what I mean? I was just conscious of him. But then he starts saying stuff, and I'm not sure what he's saying. Then I realize he's following me. And I'm getting nervous, but I know that I don't have far to go. So in my mind, I'm thinking I have to get to home before he gets to me. And he continues saying stuff, and he's following me, and I know he doesn't like me. He's getting angrier and angrier. And as I'm getting closer to home, it just so happens this particular day, a lot of my family had come to visit. So I see my cousins are outside and all that stuff, so I'm yelling out to them, like, "Oh, what's up?" Yelling out to them, trying to get their attention. By the time I could get their attention, I turned around and the guy was gone. But it's just to say that it was a situation where I honestly don't know what his intentions were, but I didn't feel like they were anything nice. Long story short, I would still hang out in Chicago. I would still hang out in the city, and I would even eventually move back to Chicago for college and stuff like that. But even in high school, there were a ton of times where, man, I would be out with my friends or we were doing stuff, and we would get pulled over and just harassed by the police for no reason. One particular time, I remember we were sitting, my uncle had asked us to take him to one of his friend's house while we were on our way to somewhere else. So we took him to his friend's house. We were waiting for him to come down. As we're sitting out there, this car pulled up. Turns out it was an unmarked police car, but we didn't know what it was. This car pulls up. These guys just jump out, guns out, the whole 9 yards, and come rushing towards the car. My friend's about to pull off. Then he realizes that these are police officers. So we sit there and they yell at us, get out the car, the whole 9 yards. We get out the car. Police officer throws me on the hood, empties out my pockets, throws stuff everywhere, all around. For no reason, when they're finished picking on us, they say, you guys shouldn't be in this area, even though it's right around where we live at. Get away from here right away. And so we end up leaving, but it was just another thing in the bag of like, man, why are we being treated this way? Why do people hate us? Why do they not like us? I'll tell you one final story, even though there's a ton of stories that I could tell you, unfortunately. I moved for college. I moved to one of the nicer areas, Lincoln Park, one of the most expensive areas in Chicago. And I'm there not because I got the money. I'm there for school. That's where the college I went to was. And I'm there, and I'm like, man, you see people doing things, so I want to do the things that the people around me are doing. I'm from the South Side, but I decided I'm going to try rollerblading. So I would rollerblade around the whole 9 yards, and it was fun. I liked it. It wasn't something you see on the South Side, but it was fun. So I'm rollerblading around one day. Again, police pulled me over. Same scenario. I had a bag on me. They took my bag. They're going all through my bag. They're looking at stuff. And they asked me, what's in your bag? Now, by this time, I had become a disciple. So I couldn't figure out what they were talking about. They keep telling me, what's in your bag? What's in your bag? And I'm nervous. I'm anxious the whole 9 yards. I don't know why they're even pulling me over. This time, I'm not even in a car. I'm just rollerblading. And it turns out I had a Bible in my bag. And he goes to me, you don't know you have a Bible in your bag? And now, at this point as well, I'm older now. I'm in college. One, I'm not as afraid, right? But also, I'm tired of it. It's been happening a lot. And so I asked him, is there something wrong? Did something happen? The police officer looks at me and says, no, but something could have happened. And at that point, I know he's just picking on me. And I don't say these things to get you upset or frustrated, but I say these things to say that many of us, if not all of us, have these reasons in our lives to get angry and frustrated and allow these things that happen in our world to control us. And we're talking about that today. But before we go on, I'm going to let Charlene share her story.
All right. Amen. So my name is Charlene Wills, as you know. And I was born and raised in the middle of nowhere in Africa, in Kenya. I was born to my mom, who was 18 at that time, and then we moved to the big city, Nairobi, and she became a disciple when I was 8 years old, and our lives kind of changed from there. And at around the age of 15, my mom got married to my dad, who is stepdad, but that's like my dad. And they got married, and then soon after, I was baptized at 16, and then my brother was born when I was 16, and later on, when I was 23, my sister was born. So I've been in the U.S. for the last, how long have we been married? 11. We've been married for 11, I've been here for 10. And so it's been an adventure. But I'm gonna share my story from a different perspective where I grew up in Kenya. Most of us are Africans there, and in Nairobi, we have a little bit of a diversity. And I just so happened to go to a high school that is actually really diverse. A lot of high schools, the government high schools, normal high schools, you go to a boarding school. And you stay like for 3 months and then come home for a month when school is out. But I went to a day school, means I go to home, back and home, like what you guys do. Go to school, come back home, next day, da-da-da. And so the school I went to is owned by the Hindu community. So it's a Hindu school. That meant like, we have the Christian system, the African system, where you do the Kenyan system, the regular school system, and then there's a side where you can do the British system, and that meant that also we are interacting with the Hindu community as well. And so our school, we had Arabs, Africans of different tribes, and we had Somalis as well, but also we had the Hindu community. We are all in one school, but we are very segregated. In fact, the two systems allowed us to be completely segregated because the Hindus were one system, and the Africans, very few Africans were mixed in. And around that time, I became a disciple, studied the Bible, I became a disciple in my equivalent of a sophomore year. And, You guys know if you're a disciple or a kingdom kid or whatever in high school, it is not easy, right? It's not easy being a Christian. It's not easy even trying to be a good person in high school. It's not easy being in high school, period, right? And so I was trying to be a disciple, but I felt like I lived two lives. Monday through Friday, I was in school, trying to just hustle through high school, trying to be nice, trying not to be too bad, but I was also not very good. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I hanged out with disciples, go to church. I was a nice girl. And one of the things that was interesting is because of the segregation within our school, we had a lot of like conversations and hurtful conversations towards the people who are not in our groups, especially the ones who are not Africans, the ones who are not in our system. So we had a lot of like really mean comments towards the Hindu community. We talked about them, we talked about their food, we talked about how dressed, we talked about everything. Mean, and you know what mean girls do. So we were those mean girls. And it was so crazy because would have these conversations, and then later on, when we have like parties, because it was a Hindu community, we'll go to their parties, we'll go to their temples. They had the best food, the best snacks, the best dance. So we had so much fun when we were not being mean to each other. You know, we danced to their music, they danced to our music. It was just so much fun when we did the fun things. But when it came to real life, we were really, there was tension sometimes, it was weird, just stuff going on that was not exciting for anybody, really. And what I learned through that time is to see how I became a victim sometimes of the same, like they would obviously retaliate and do the same to us. But I was a victim at some times, but a lot of the times I was also a perpetrator of this, of being hateful and being mean, talking against people because of your tribal or ethnicity or any of those things. And I felt justified because that's what everybody around me did it, you know? Even though I was a disciple and a young Christian, I didn't see a big deal because we did it. In fact, one of the things that I needed to do as part of my repentance was to talk to people that I outwardly said that I did not like them. In fact, I hated them because nothing that they did to me, just because, you know. And so part of my repentance was going out and talking to them. One of them was actually even my math teacher, who I actually had to go and apologize to, because when he was, you know, when you're talking about amongst girls, you just say very hateful things towards them. My point is here that I was part of the perpetrating of the crime, but I was also sometimes a victim. The other thing that I remember through just this time living in Kenya is I remember when my mom and dad got married. This is the first time that I felt personally hurt by the tribal disputes around us. Is my mom got married to my dad, who's from a different tribe from her tribe. And the other thing is my mom is a single mom with me, and on the day of the wedding, my dad's family did not come to the wedding. Like, it was my dad and then the rest of the church and my mom's family. And then another thing, during that very time, there was a delay when you're starting the wedding, and I was like, what's going on? I was a bridesmaid, 15, looking like, oh, I'm so excited. And then I just so happened to be behind my mom, and I was like, what's going on? There seems to be a weird commotion before walking down the aisle. And it just so happened, I found out later that my grandfather could not walk my mom down the aisle. And I'm like, what happened? And she said, traditionally, because she has me as outside a wedding, he as an elder of the church cannot walk my mom down the aisle. And that really hurt. And it didn't even click so much to me. I was like, what? Okay, that's weird. I don't even know what that tradition is. But it was more like, oh, it's because of me. I am the problem. Because I exist, because I'm here, that's why my dad's family did not come to the wedding, and they don't like her, they don't like my mom, and that's why my own grandfather, who I love, and by the way, that didn't stop me from, you know, we're fine, I love him, whatever, but that, for him, it stopped him from being able to be part of something that was so great for his daughter. They reconciled later on, but that was so crucial for us at that point, but he could not be a part of it. And then the other thing that happened in around 2007, we had an election. In Kenya, we have elections every 4 years, similar to here. And what happens is, obviously, we have 52 tribes in Kenya. I speak three languages. Obviously, English, Swahili, the national language, the tribal language. I can hear a few other ones, but mostly that's one tribal language out of 52 others. The most predominant are about 3 or 4. Paul, you get it? Yeah, about that. And I'm from one of the most predominant tribes, and my mom got married to my dad, who's from another tribe, and during the election time, there was a lot of divide, even within the church. And what that felt for me, it was so scary because the people that I have grown up in the church loving, and I don't even know what some of them, their tribe, apart from you can tell by people's names, but for the most part, you don't really care about their tribe, right? And you're like, you just love them as auntie, uncle, and whoever. And then all of a sudden, they're like, ooh, I don't like that person because they're supporting so-and-so. Ooh, I don't know why this person is like this because of their tribe. And it just took me, I was shocked. Yes, we were not divided in our home because I could not choose sides between my dad and my mom, but the people that I was close to were having issues with people that I'm close to. We're having issues because my mom is from a different tribe or because my other friend is from a different tribe. And I saw the social divides that are out there coming into our church and shaking the core of what I loved and believed in and how much I loved the church. The church brought me up. The church is where I know. The church is everything I know. And it did affect how I viewed the people that I thought were best friends all this time. I started feeling that that safety was being questioned. And actually, I just found out, because there's a lot of people here from Kenya, that they're having an election. I knew about this, but I didn't know the details. But there's an election happening this month or something like that. And everybody's already feeling nervous, getting scared about what will happen, because this was one of the worst times. It was killings that happened, neighbors turned against each other, so they're fearing that might happen again. And so why am I sharing this? Is to show there's a reality that our world is going to be divided. In fact, it's so easy to be divided even in my home. And the cool thing is, later on after me coming here, obviously it's been 11 years now. We are blessed to have 2 beautiful boys. We love them. The oldest there is AJ. He's named after Antoine, Antoine Jr. And the youngest there is Zane. He's a boy, just to clarify. He just has a lot of hair. And he's going to be 4 on the 17th of this month. And these boys, I was so excited. First of all, I didn't want to have boys. I wanted to have girls because I was an only girl with my mom. But when I had 2 boys, I was like, oh my gosh, they are so energetic. How am I going to do this? But I love them so much. I love the energy. And these 2 boys could not be any different. AJ is loving, warm. He's like this cool kid. We call him the 6-year-old teenager because he really thinks he's a teen. And Zane is this little kid who is cute but very sneaky. We have to always find where he is. He's always stuffing stuff. You try to find something. Somebody came to watch him and said they lost their earpods in our house. And I was like, hey, was Zane by them? He's like, no. I'm like, trust me, he got your earpods somewhere in the house. They just could not be any different. But when you see them watching TV together, they're just leaning on each other. They love each other. But when it comes to when there's war, it's real. That little boy is not little anymore. He swings, he fights, he strangles his big brother. And it's so interesting to see that dynamic, that even in our own home, we can actually have things that allow us to divide us. And if we don't watch, if we're not aware of how we teach them to be unified, that they can be able to actually be even more divided when they grow up.
I think about our story collectively connected to our story individually. And the reality is that, man, we have to raise these 2 boys in the same world that we grew up in. I worry at times, what will it be like for them? Will they face some of the same things that I face when it comes to racism or prejudice or socialism or whatever the case may be? And how will that affect them? And what we're going to talk about as we continue on and start to look in scriptures is really what can we do to fight these things that attempt to divide us. So we're going to start in Galatians 5:19. Don't worry about turning. I have all the scriptures on the screen, and we're going to go through some of them rather fast for time's sake. But I want you to be able to just, more than anything, follow. Feel free to take notes to hell 9 yards. Write them down so you can get back to them later. Galatians 5:19, as many of you are aware of, it says, the acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. And I want you to think about this and consider, when we think about these social constructs, this is what we're really seeing. We're seeing the hatred. We're seeing the discord, the jealousy, the fits of rage, the selfish ambition, and dissensions. Ultimately, when we see these social constructs that can divide us, when we see these things that go on in our world that separate us, what we're really seeing is sin. What we're really seeing is this sinful world we live in showing itself in different ways. And you may say to yourself, well, why does that make a difference? And I want you to consider how we respond to these two different things that we usually use as a way to how we react to these social constructs, or really to any of these evil things that we see in our world. When you think about sin, even by definition, it's a word, deed, or desire in opposition to the eternal law of God. It's something that goes against God. We connect it to God, and we connect it to, us not being who God wants us to be. When you think of an offense, it's an annoyance or resentment brought about by a perceived insult to or disregard for oneself or one's standards or principles. It's something directly attacking us. It's something that hits us. Oftentimes, even as the definition says, it may not be true. It may be something we perceive and we make it out to be true, but it's something completely personal to us. When you think about a sin and you see someone in sin, you see someone who may be struggling with alcoholism or purity, or someone close to you that's having a hard time being respectful to their parents. Oftentimes, we think about things that connect with God. We think about forgiveness, grace, repentance, mercy. We often respond saying, how can I help my friend? How can I be there for him? How can I take care of him and help him deal with this struggle, or her deal with this hard thing that she's trying to deal with? When we think of an offense, though, we often think of annoyance, resentment, revenge, punishment. We often think of, this person deserves this. We see something on TV, we say, I hope they get caught. I hope they get thrown under the jail for what they did. They deserve to be punished. We feel justified to be upset and to be angry. And I want us to look at how Jesus responds to situations similar to the things that we're talking about today, and see how we can learn how to respond different. It says in John 4:4-10, now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. And the first thing I want us to do as we think about this scripture is just to ponder a little bit. Because see, sometimes what we do when we sit down and have our quiet times, or we get ready to read, or we get ready to study our Bibles, is we set aside this, our most comfortable chair. We get a nice table, maybe our favorite drink or a glass of water, and we prepare to sit down and have this peaceful time to read and pray to God. Our parents walk past, hey, mom and dad, just studying my Bible. The whole 9 yards, like we're comfortable. We're at ease. Or maybe some of you are similar. I have these days too, where you roll out of bed and you barely awoke, but you like, I gotta read. You know what I mean? I gotta study something. And so you get ready to read, but you're oftentimes at peace and relaxed. And when you read the scriptures, that's the state of mind that you read them in, and you may read them like that way. Like, oh, Jesus, why are you talking to me? You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. But I want us to think about how she really may have said this and how she really may have felt when she said this. Chances are that's not the state of mind she was in. You know, she says this right off the bat. You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. Your people hate my people. You don't like me. Your people won't even come to where we live at. You avoid us as much as possible. You can't stand me because of the things that happened between our ancestors. And to this day, you look down on us. Why are you talking to me? She may have thought about the man versus woman issue where, you know, even the scriptures tell us a little bit farther down that even Jesus' disciples were sitting there wondering, why is he talking to her? She may have felt like, man, I know you look down on me. I know you don't respect me as a woman. I know you don't have anything good for me. You're probably just using me. Why are you talking to me? You know, I think about the fact that they're at a well. And we don't oftentimes think about this. But, you know, in their culture, the well was a pretty special place. You know, when you look in the Old Testament, there's a lot of significant things that happen at a well. Even in Genesis, Abraham was telling his servant to go get a son for Isaac. And his servant's like, I don't know what to do. How am I going to even get somebody to come back? And he gives him some instructions, and he tells him where to go and what to do. And it tells us that based off of his instructions, he made his camels kneel beside a well just outside the town. It was evening, and the women were coming out to draw water. See, if you wanted a wife, a good place to find the women were at the well. You know what I mean? If you had some game, if you wanted to shoot your shot, hey, you go to the well. You know, we know that Jacob found Ruth at a well. We know even Moses by accident, right? He grew up a little privileged. He didn't have to go get water for himself. But when he left Egypt, he's running away. And where does he end up? By a well. And who does he see? The women coming out to draw water at the well. And he ends up finding his wife at a well as well. This was a significant place. But she knows he's not coming to find her. He's not coming because he likes her. I don't know if she's like just mad that he's talking to her to begin with, or if she feels like you're in my way. But again, she may be like, why are you talking to me? Not only that, but when you look at this scripture, it says it was evening when the women came out. Well, for her, this is the middle of the day. It says she came out at noon. If you look at the scriptures, you almost even get the impression we don't even know if this is her town. She may be actually hiding. She may be insecure. You know, if you know the scripture, you know a little bit about her life. She may not want anyone who knows her to see her out, right? To see what she's doing. She may be like, man, Jesus, I'm not trying to be around anybody right now. Why are you talking to me? But either way, chances are this wasn't a nice, peaceful conversation. Either way, even just looking at the words, it doesn't sound like she was welcoming Jesus in. She was being friendly to Jesus. She didn't want him to talk to her, and she let it be known that there were reasons why she didn't want him to talk to her. And here's the reality when we think about our sin, or when we look at things as being offended. When we're offended, we oftentimes feel justified to be offensive. And if we're honest with ourselves, when we're offended with something, or it may not even be you. Maybe this hasn't been your situation. Maybe you've seen people. Maybe you've looked at people's Facebook. I don't know if y'all look at Facebook, but their Facebook or Instagram posts or Twitter tweets. Or you see how Hollywood, how they talk about other stars. It could be someone that was the biggest star in Hollywood yesterday, but they found something that they did the next day. And what happens is we oftentimes respond offensive when we feel offended. It's not even uncommon that the response is more offensive, or at least as offensive as the initial offense. And everybody welcomes it. Everybody accepts it because we were offended. You're justified because you were offended. Even in our church at times, as Charlene mentioned, we can be okay with someone being offensive because we were offended. I want to share you a quote from a well-renowned poet, a poet that I used to study quite a bit when I was in high school. I don't know if they study him as much anymore, but he said something that's really significant that I hold on to. He said, is Jay-Z, he said, hurt people hurt people. And we're oftentimes, we see these things, we feel these things. You see them, if it's not with you, with your friends or with your parents, or you see how people are responding, and we get hurt. And we have to learn, how do we respond to that hurt? How do we go after being something different and not just respond in the way that feels natural or feels right or that we feel justified to do? And when you look at Jesus going after being united, you see we can't react like the world. We can't react like everyone else. The world would tell him, don't talk to that woman. Don't even go through that city. Those people are horrible. Those people are evil. We don't like those people. They're unclean. They're nasty. But Jesus ignored all of that. We can't react like our friends. Even Jesus' disciples were sitting there looking at him funny, wondering why he's talking to this woman. But Jesus didn't let that dictate how he treated her or how he interacted with her. We can't react like our family. Sometimes we see in our homes, different responses. And you might see similar to what Charlene said. You know, I've even heard it or seen it where someone might make a statement and I'll say, we have a lot of friends who are this culture or this race or in that situation. And they'll say, well, not them. But they'll feel comfortable making that blanket statement about everybody else that fits in that group. And you may have seen something similar like that. Honestly, even sometimes in our church, we may see these things. And I know Charlene shared about political things. I'm sure you haven't never seen any issues within our churches because one person supports one person and somebody supports somebody else. But we have to realize that just because you see something in church doesn't make it right. And we have to be respectful and we have to be loving even to those people who may respond in ways that we feel in our gut is wrong. But we can't just feel like just because we see it, it makes it right. And I want to even go so far as to say, I think this group of people, your generation has a special place in our ministry, being a future of our churches, being the person that I hope one day somebody in this room or at this conference is doing some lesson that's significant to my son 10 years from now. You have a special place where you see the world far different than we do. It's not as uncommon for you to have really close friends that are from different social status, racial status, economic status, sexes, whatever the case may be, that are in these different areas that we oftentimes have bitter feelings towards because of things we experienced growing up. You have the ability to show us something that we may have never realized before because of your specific purpose or your perspective. But it's only going to happen if you don't allow our issues and our struggles to taint the way you view the world, and you continue to fight through everything you hear and everything you see to love the way Christ loved and to go after being like Christ and not reacting like the rest of the world, and even some of us can sometimes react when we see or feel these things.
All right, awesome. So, yeah, one of the things that I have learned of late, when we were getting married, we had a lot to deal with. The immigration part, the moving part, all that stuff. And obviously, because I grew up in the church in Nairobi, they had a huge influence. My parents are part of the church. A lot of people that I love and respect are part of the church. And there came a time when I felt like there was just this tug of war between the people that I loved and now looking at Antoine as my husband and considering the things that we want to do. And I remember one of the couples pulling us aside. They actually had, they had been a part of my life for a long time, but had moved away and just came to during the time we were getting married. And they pulled us aside and said, hey, I noticed that there's a frustration here. I noticed that there's stuff that is happening that there's a tug of war between where you are at and what the people are telling you versus what you guys want and what the plan is and all that stuff. And they said something profound to me at that point, and I've used a lot in my life to help me navigate when I'm feeling offended, especially with people around the church and especially people I love. And I extend it also to those we don't know, we don't interact with, or people out there. And I'll challenge you to do this. To consider, for us to be unified, to consider letting people make mistakes with you. To consider letting people make mistakes with you. Meaning letting people say things, I'm not saying letting people abuse you or say things that are hurtful to you, But allowing that when that happens, give them a room to grow. Give them room to understand that you might not be able to correct everything that you see, or what you see is different for them. Like Antoine is saying, honestly, through the church, we are making a lot of mistakes. In fact, we are trying to navigate this whole aspect of considering the LGBT community, considering the social divide, the sexism, and all the stuff that we are facing, the black and white issue, the race issue. We haven't even started talking about those we don't talk about, like the Hispanic community and all those people. Yeah, we are making a lot of mistakes. But I would consider for you to allow people to make mistakes with you, to allow people to make mistakes around you, not to say that you don't correct them. For example, I'll give you an example. I grew up in Kenya. When white people come to visit, I'm sorry, I'm going to use that word, but what's the right word? But when people come to visit, I used to do Hope Youth Course, so we'd have a lot of mix of people coming, and there would be a lot of brothers and sisters who were white and mixed and all that stuff. And a lot of African kids have never seen people who are white, and especially their hair. It was so fascinating. And so I was one of them. Oh, I want to touch your hair. It's so silky, it's so long. You're very curious. Actually, as all human beings, we are curious. So funny enough for me, I was quite surprised when I came here as a black woman who is actually not an African-American woman, but I'm black. Got that. But I had sisters who were saying that, oh, I don't like people touching my hair. I'm like, that's an issue? Oh, it is an issue. Wait, should I be offended by that? But technically, I'm not offended by that. You can come touch my hair. However, I still respect that there are people that's something that is different. I actually asked several sisters, what does it mean when you feel offended that somebody is touching your hair? And I get it now. I'm still not offended, but I come from that. If I was white, that would have been a problem, right? That would have been a problem if I came and just touched your hair if I was white. But how about you allow that sister who comes and touches your hair to have a moment, not out of anger, but allowing them to say, hey, you know what? I don't like people touching my hair, and this is why. And actually, it might do you better not to touch anybody else's hair unless you ask them. What you've done for that person is help them be able to bridge that gap and open their eyes. I'll share with you something that happened just 2 days ago. Paul here is from, I know Paul when he was in Kenya, yes, he's been raised in the New York church and all that. His dad knew me when I was 8 years old. So I grew up, he's like my other dad, you know? And so his dad is mixed. His dad is, his dad is Black, African, Kenyan, and his mom is white, American, I think, yes. Okay, so he's mixed. Paul's dad, Rayola, is mixed. Grown up with him, known him all this time. And so we were talking here about, the stuff that is going on. We're talking about social issues and stuff like that. We're catching up on life. And somebody asked, we were talking about his race, like, oh, you're mixed and all that? Yeah, I know. We're talking about it. I know about all that. And then I said, oh, in Kenya, we call them half-caste, which is normal. If you go and say that now, it's not a big deal. And then I looked at his face. I was like, wait, is that okay? Are you, what's that? Like, what's on your face? Is actually, that was very offensive to me. And I was like, oh, I did not know that. I did not know that until yesterday. And so there's a lot of things that we hear, even growing up as a black woman or a black kid, mixed, or white, whatever, that you might not know will be offensive to the next person that you've known probably all your life. And so does that equal him not talking to me the rest of the time because he feels a certain way about me? No. Guess what? I was educated right there. And I was able to realize that, wow, that was hurtful to him. And now I can be able to consider that what I say can be hurtful to people, even when we do it as a community. Even when the next person I go to Kenya now and hear somebody say that, I might say, hey, by the way, that's not always encouraging for somebody. It's actually hurtful to people. So I want us to be encouraged that in your homes, in your church, in your friends group, in the world around you, allow people to make mistakes with you, but also allow them opportunity for them to learn the things that you've learned. But also remember that you can make the same mistakes, and we want to give each other the room to make mistakes. Thanks.
And we really have to think about this from our goal ultimately is to go after being like Jesus. When you look at this story, Jesus didn't avoid her because she was different. He didn't look down on her because she was different. But even after she made these comments, Jesus didn't fight her. He didn't wrestle with her. What he did was he accepted her. And despite the things she said and however she said it, he loved her. And as we continue on the story, it says, "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." And I want you to tell you, as Jesus is talking about being thirsty, clearly from the statements afterwards, he's not talking about a drink, or he's not talking about water. Some of you may remember this commercial, Dos Equis commercial, right? You remember, I see at least one of y'all remember it. This guy, they would give these stories about how amazing this man was. In fact, I believe the statement was, he might possibly be the most interesting man in the world. And then he would drink this Dos Equis, the drink of the most interesting man in the world. And at the end of it, he would say, "Stay thirsty, my friends." And the intent was that you would drink this beer, this amazing drink that's being drunk by the most interesting man in the world. And maybe that would make you more interesting too. Maybe not, but you would drink it, and when you were finished, all you would want is some more. Stay thirsty. Never fulfill your thirst. Keep coming. Come get another beer. Come get another drink. Come back to us again. Stay thirsty. And when you look at this story and this woman, and you even ask yourself about why she may have been by this well, once we understand wells, she had gone through husband after husband after husband, to the point where the man she's with now didn't even respect her enough to marry her. And yet she's still back by the well again. She's still thirsty. She's still going back again to try to quench this thirst. When we think about these social constructs, we go after, we see the hurt that's caused, right? And in our minds, we think maybe tomorrow the world will fulfill us. Maybe tomorrow the world will be better. Maybe tomorrow racism will be gone. Maybe tomorrow sexism will be gone. Maybe tomorrow people won't judge each other by how much money they make or their social status or how they dress or the color of their skin. And we keep going back to the well again, and we keep getting disappointed over and over again because we're expecting the world to fulfill our thirst. But the world never will. The world is always going to find ways to hate. It's so bad that many of you, like me, may have even seen the silliest stuff separate us. Even if we were to get rid of racism, we would find something else. I literally know people who don't talk to people because one of them likes LeBron and one of them likes Michael Jordan. And you laughing, but you probably seen people get into the worst arguments over this silliest stuff. Or maybe it's a political person. Maybe you saw different things happen when one person liked Trump and one person liked Clinton, or whatever the case may be. We keep going back to the world thinking that it's going to fulfill our thirst, and that's going to be the place where when we see changes in the world, we'll all be happy again. But what Jesus tells us is, man, the world's never going to fulfill our thirst, but we don't have to stay thirsty. We have to learn how to make decisions and be different so that even though we see the challenges in the world, we don't have to react like the world. We don't have to live like the world. And we can help ourselves and the people around us be different from the world. John 4:19 says, "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth. You know what I'm hoping for your generation, for you guys right here? That you'll be the generation that helps us older people learn how to, like Jesus, deal with the ugly truths. Right. Learn how to look at the things in our cultures. And just like she did, she said, man, this is where you Jews tell us to worship. You notice what Jesus did? He didn't ignore her comment. He didn't get angry at her. He said, you know what? You're right about us. Also, this is what the Samaritans say. And the reality is, even both of them, though both of them had their thoughts and their places, he says, man, what God desires is for us to be united ultimately. There's problems on both sides that we need to look at, and let's be honest with it. And I hope you'll be the generation that learns how to talk about these issues as opposed to just reacting, as opposed to just getting offended and being even more offensive and continuing this cycle and this circle of hate over and over again. I hope you'll be the ones that learn to just be open and honest and vulnerable with each other about the things that hurt you. And not only that, but that you'll be the ones that learn how to listen with love and hear other people share. These are the things that have offended me. These are the things that have hurt me on both sides. And be willing to work through those things and talk through those things. And ultimately, that you'll be the ones to help us learn even more how to love like Jesus and not let these things from our past continue to harm us in our environments that we live in our workplaces, in our schools that we go to, in our families, in our homes, in our church, and help us to be more like Christ as you're giving us chances to make mistakes, giving us chances to learn from each other and to talk to each other through these things.
And so, I'm sorry. All right, so one of the things that is about being unified is, like Antoine is saying, the world cannot be our answer, right? If that was the case, there was only one perfect person that we know was perfect at everything he did, right? Do you know who that person is? Jesus. What did they do to him? They crucified him. So guess what? None of us is going to be able to do it right. No one community is going to be able to do it right. No one generation is going to be able to do it right. However, like Antoine is saying, we have the opportunity, instead of putting it on Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, and saying all the other things that we can say on social media, right? How about we consider this thing? How about we consider the scripture that says, do not be quick to be provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the laps of fools. That's Ecclesiastes 7, verse 9. And maybe consider this. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is not the one who wants glory to overlook. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. It doesn't say to overlook sin. It says to overlook an offense. So instead of allowing what you've been offended by offend you to the point of being offensive again, how about considering overlooking it? That is in Proverbs 19, verse 11. How about consider, instead of being so angry, in Proverbs 15, it says, verse 18, a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict. We become the part of the conflict sometimes because we are so offended, we are so angry. Instead of putting that anger into the rightful place, maybe praying about it, taking a walk, let me think about it some more, let me sleep on it, whatever the case is. So instead of the hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms down a quarrel. And another scripture that I'll say is in Psalms 37, verse 8 to 9. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil, for those who are evil will be destroyed. But those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. Honest truth is, none of the politicians, the presidents, nothing will happen, no person, human being, will be able to solve all the challenges we have in our lives. Nobody will be able to change the challenges that we have in our country, right? Even you cannot change the challenges that you have in your own life by yourself. You can not even change the things that are happening in your own household because we don't have control over those things, right? So the only person that you can rely on is God. Why did he put us here? Why did he allow us to be here? That's a bigger question. However, as we are here, not letting those things of the world, not letting our burdens be able to push you down. Sometimes I talk to teens, and I feel like you carry so much weight of the mistakes of your parents. What your parents have gone through, they have to take care of their mess and need to learn how to take care of their mess. But sometimes you carry the weight with you, and you still have to go through life anyway. You still have to go through the dramas of high school, figuring out your grades, what you're going to do after high school. All that is overwhelming enough without the other stuff that you carry with you that the society is throwing at you. The society is throwing at you that the church is not the answer. And that's true. The church on its own is not the answer. But the church with Christ and people who are committed to doing the things that are righteous, yes, we can be able to make mistakes with each other, but the answer is truly Jesus. And remember, like I said earlier, they did persecute Jesus. He's the only one who could have done this right. But even then, not everybody could have accepted him. And the last scripture I'll leave with you is Leviticus chapter 19:17 says, "You shall not hate your fellow countrymen in your heart. You may surely provoke your neighbor, but shall not incur sin because of him." Basically saying that you gotta be careful. You might not be hating anybody based on their race. You might not be upset with people because of where they come from. But careful what is it is in you that allows you to be divisive with people around you. It might be something they put on TikTok. It might be who they follow, who they like, who they will listen to, music that they listen, whatever the case is. Watch within your heart that you don't have any form of hatred or any form of divide that divides you. Because even though you will be the answer for our problems, you will also have problems of your generation. And so be aware that we live in a sinful world, a world that weighs us down. Don't let that weigh you down and put you away from the goal that God has you for a reason in your generation.
So I know we put a lot on you guys. I know there's a lot that you hold up. Again, you are our future. You're the ones that'll be talking to my kids. You're the ones that'll be helping them understand how to be more like Christ. So it is something to hold on to and something to carry for us. Even if you're not a disciple or ready to be a disciple, you're still part of the future of our country, of our world, and wherever you're at. So it's important for us to understand this if we're going to start to make some changes in our world. But I want to give you some time now. We have some time left where if you have any questions or any thoughts or even any things that you say, man, this just didn't sound right. This is an opportunity right now to be able to share those things. If you have any, I'll bring the mic out there and you'll be able to share or ask any questions or share any thoughts.
So, I wanna. So how can I become? How can I become a Christian?
That's a good point. I think based off of what we're talking about and becoming a Christian, it's ultimately learning how to be more like Christ. You know, you go back to the city that you're at and maybe in your team ministry or whatever the case may be, talk to your team leaders about, man, what are some things that I could work on or learn, and even ask them to study the Bible so that you can learn how to be more like Christ, which is ultimately, I think, what helps us all to be more united. I saw another, yes.
So what was it like when you said you were growing up, you had like a lot of racial discrimination? Like how did it affect like your family as like a whole?
That's a good question. And I'll tell you, so for me, I kind of looked at things different. In my family, there was a lot of tension and even anger and frustration towards, I mean, just be honest, towards white people. The interesting part for me growing up is I realized two things. One, that again, I had a lot of white people that did some bad things to me, but I had a lot of them that did really good things for me as well. Even times where I would have expected someone else to be there for me, it was somebody who wasn't like me that was there to help me. Equally speaking, I had a lot of black people in my life that did a lot of good things for me, but I had some that I would have expected to really be there for me do bad things as well. And so for me personally, I learned and realized at a really early age that it's not the color of somebody's skin that makes them act the way they are. We all have good and bad parts in every race, every culture, every background. We use that as an excuse, but the reality is it's each individual's decision to be whoever they're going to be. Got one in the front.
So my question is, how do you deal, like for me, I'm a very emotional person, especially when it comes to like race and stuff and racism and all that and sexism. So how would you say you deal with like your emotions or like anger towards a certain group or people?
So that's a very good question. And I will say this, I deal with it much different now than I used to deal with it when I was younger. When I was younger, I was one of those people that would stuff things. And so I would just stuff it. A lot of situations like with the police or something, you can't really react. You know what I mean? If you react, it would just make the situation worse for me. And so I would learn to stuff it, but what I found is, what would happen is I would end up bursting out with other people, usually people who I really cared about, that would just push me over the edge. And they would get the full frustration and anger of everything that I was feeling. Now what I found is, one, I'm learning to not get offended as easy, and more so see, kind of similar to what we talked about, man, just like I have my things that I struggle with, people have things that they struggle with. And just like I want people to look at me and my issues that I struggle with and see somebody who's trying to fight to be better or who needs help to be better, I try to look at them in ways where, man, I see that they are someone who needs help to be better. And so it helps. I'm not saying that I respond correctly all the time, but that's what I'm going after. Yes.
So, similarly to you, where I live, there aren't a lot of people of color, especially in my school. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes I hear people I consider to be my friends making jokes that I don't really appreciate. And there are times where I'm okay with it, and there are times where, like, I'm not. Mm-hmm. So how would you say, like, how do you set boundaries of, like, when you say these certain things, like, how would you tell people you consider to be your friends that you don't appreciate what they're saying?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll tell you even another piece. There are some things that maybe didn't bother me at one point in time, but later on they did bother me. You know what I mean? What I would suggest, especially with the people that you consider your friends, I wouldn't do it in that circle right there, because it'll be really hard for them to hear you. But in the times where you're able to be by yourself or something, just share with them, man, you know, I know this is something that commonly happens. I don't look down on you. I'm not judging you, my boy, whatever the case may be. But when you say that, this is how it makes me feel, and this is how it makes people like me feel. And a great friend will respect it. Sometimes, I'll be honest with you, it's hard for people to understand it. And really, realistically, as Charlene mentioned, we have to allow people to make mistakes. Sometimes getting these things take time. Initially, your friend may be like, oh, you just overreacting or you tripping. But, you know, in time, you hope and pray that, you know, what you sharing, what you feel, or whatever the case may be, they'll start to understand more how this can make you feel, especially when they're in a group setting. And for me, one of the things that helped me out a lot is I had certain friends that really, after having discussions, they stood up for me in group settings, so I wouldn't have to be the object of everybody's attention and scorn. Yes.
Sorry. There's been a discussion of like women's roles in my ministry. How do you think we can like address and recognize that without being like blameful, and how can we approach those types of situations with grace?
That's a good one. And I think you kind of answered it at the end. with grace and love, and honestly, it's one of those things that's just going to take time for us to figure out. I want you to try to picture it like this. Many of us spent far more time not being disciples than being disciples. And even if, like, I'm at the point where I've been a disciple almost as long as I wasn't, but there's still years of bad practices, bad habits, and all of that stuff that I'm trying to figure out, and you have to figure it out before you can even start working on it. And once you start working on it, you realize that maybe your own battles against certain struggles or challenges, even after you figure it out, you start working on it, you're using the scriptures, you're praying, it still takes time to make changes. We have to just be patient and realize that, man, we're dealing with hundreds of years of hurt that have been going on in our world, and we're not going to be able to solve it in one conversation. So while I believe a lot of changes in those areas are going to come as we figure it out, it's going to take time. So I would face it with grace, just like you said.
I would love to add on to it that it's a big debate, a healthy debate, but a lot of work that has to be done. So for centuries, men have been in charge of a lot of things, and now we're bringing up this idea of like, wait, how did Jesus look at women? And the honest truth, we're all coming from different backgrounds. I have to consider that my culture plays on the way I view that. So I myself, as a woman leader, might not be able to be wanting to jump real quickly because I'm coming from a culture where I have been, it's in my head that, oh, I don't have to jump and do it. But I'm also within my character, I also tend to be very assertive when I need to be assertive. So even learning where that is personal and which is not personal. When we're trying to change things as a community, a lot of things hit us personally. Women's issues are going to hit us women personally. And sometimes I've sat in groups of women where we feel so many different things, and sometimes I've had to figure out, wait, is that because it's personal to that person or because that's an issue overall? And so like Antoine is saying, it's going to take a lot of time. I think even when women had the what do you call that thing in the 70s, whatever it is, the transition of women going to work, yes, we had started having our voice and stuff, but the way things went as human beings, I'll say this period as human beings, when you want something, we sometimes go to an extreme before we learn where the balance is. And so that's going to happen anyway because there's a lot of, and I'm not saying emotion because we're women, but emotion because we're human and we're involved personally. So I think for me as a person, what I've decided to do is take it. First of all, I'm not a reader where I'll read all these documents. I'm not. You know, what I've done is sat with different people who've done that and kind of gotten the idea. And I don't have a problem listening to a man as a man telling me because I want to get at where they're coming from. They've done the work. I didn't do the work. And then I'll sit with other women who've done the work as well and get their perspective. And that way I'm getting more from an informational point of view before I make it too personal to me. Before I'm standing up and saying, oh, I want to do this as a role for me. And that way I'm learning as I go along as the change is happening. I don't know if that helps. You had a question?
So like it's kind of similar to what he said, but like instead of your friends, like what if your parents say things that they don't necessarily find offensive because of the generation gap, but you take offense to it? So how would you approach that like humbly without like being disrespectful?
Right, and I think it's not always easy, let's be honest. I think with our parents, with leaders and all of that stuff, not in a bad way towards them, but sometimes it's hard because it's difficult. We play this role of want to be respectful and at the same time maybe being frustrated or whatever, and oftentimes that causes something in us that may say it in the wrong way that creates more challenges. And so it's really learning, as your parents I'm sure are going after learning how to hear these things, but learning how to say them in the best way possible and being patient, honestly. And I'm one of those guys that I'm a little older. I'm probably around the same age as most of your parents in that realm. Sometimes it's hard for us to hear these things again when we've done things a certain way for a long time. And so really just with a lot of patience and a lot of respect to just help us understand in loving, nice ways. Again, going back to similar to his, I wouldn't say it like when there's tension there, maybe in a time where, hey, we're all Everything's nice. We just finished watching cartoons or whatever. Y'all don't watch cartoons, I don't know. But in a nice, friendly time, just say, you know, Mom or Dad, when you said this, I thought about some of my friends, and it kind of really rubbed me the wrong way. You know what I mean? But let them know you love them and you care for them. More than anything, let them know that you're not upset with them or frustrated, but just wanted them to know how you feel, even though you know they may still feel the same way or whatever the case may be. That type of thing.
Any other questions? Any takers?
We'll go back here and then we'll come back.
You guys didn't want to leave class early?
No.
So I feel like we all know the church's views on the LGBTQ community, but sometimes I feel like I'm confused because I'll see like some churches they'll have like pride flags up or something like that, and I just feel like the church, it's just super confusing for me, like how to make them feel like not separated from us, or we want to be united with them, but these are our views, or yeah.
So I would say this, and all of these topics, I'm trying really hard to stay within our topic because that's a huge topic to cover. You know what I mean? I would say by first, not focusing on your church's view, the church's view, a church's view, whatever the case may be, but we really have to start wrestling to go after what is God's view. And at the end of the day, the big thing is God desires for us to love everyone, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's somebody who you may feel like is struggling with this area or that area, somebody you may feel like who looks like this or that. We have to learn how to love everyone, no matter who they are. You know what I mean? And from there, we can go after seeing what God says and how do we share that and how do we deal with that and how we work through that in a loving way. And honestly, it shouldn't be a church or anything like that that dictates your point of view, but really digging in the scriptures to see what's God's view and using that. And hopefully our churches will be united and going after loving each other in the way God desires. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How do you deal with letting people in your church make mistakes with you? I think with race, like, it can be hard the first couple of times there's an issue brought up to you, but after like a couple of times of explanation, it can become hurtful. So how do you deal with addressing that to a brother or sister?
Yeah. And I think the challenge is dealing with issues won't necessarily make them not become hurtful. It almost reminds me of when they asked Jesus, like, how many times do I forgive my brother? 7 times? That sounds like a good number. And then he said, no, actually it's much higher than that. You know what I mean? Honestly, there's no limits to where our forgiveness should go. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't still hurt. And so maybe that person may not be the person that you can go to express your hurt, even though you're trying to help them understand your challenge or what you're wrestling with that they may be doing. Does that make sense? So being able to find ways to separate your hurt, because that's a realistic thing and not associated with just that person. It's a challenge we have in this world that we have to figure out. And, you know, that's just someone who's trying to figure out the challenge as well. Does that help at all?
I can also add, I think one of the other things that I've been able to do sometimes is get another safe place that is for me. One of the places that I use is my therapist, and because they're not connected to the church, they're not biased, so when I have issues with the church, because, I mean, I've been in church since I was 8 years old. I can't remember how many years that is. But you carry a lot of weight, and sometimes you can get church hurt within the church. And so sometimes when you're getting help within the church, and I'm not saying that you don't get, I still get a lot of help within the church, but that place where I can be able to discuss those things, and I don't see that person on Sunday and I'm like twitching, I'm seeing them, and then I see the person I'm talking with them, and now I'm like, oh God, they're probably talking about me, So that way I'm able to deal with my pain and my situation outside of that. And then now when I'm approaching this person, I'm learning. Like, for example, I have an issue with my biological dad 40 years now, And so that's something I have to continue dealing with it outside of talking to him. But when I do talk to him, I know I'm working on it, but I cannot engage him at this level because I'm not there yet. And I'm not saying that you can not engage people and not avoid them in fellowship, but I'm saying go to a place where you can deal with your what hurts you, where your hurt is.
And if I could just share one thing, this is kind of an overall thing, and then we'll take this last question before we close out and dismiss you. I want us to be careful. There's this thing that we all do oftentimes, and it's kind of gives us a misrepresentation of who God is and even who our church is. For instance, God calls us to be loving. Jesus showed us an example of what it means to be loving. Oftentimes, if you're in a group of people, you'll find somebody, or eventually if you're with them long enough, who does something that's not loving, right? And we'll sometimes associate that with the church did this, or God feels this way. That's not the church and that's not God. That's the struggle that that person has. Even if it's a larger group, or let's say even a congregation that's struggling with something, that's their weakness in going after being like God. That's not God. And I say that to say that because sometimes when we have these things happen to us, we start to build resentment towards the church and towards God for something that people are doing and where people are falling short. But that's not the church or God. And we have to, if you notice, I keep saying this, we have to go after looking to see what God desires as we see other people just like us trying to work through how they reflect God's desires. Does that make sense? Okay, last question.
So while they're teaching our parents, how are they able to help us and prepare us for the real world when we have a family of our own?
It's a good question. And this is the dilemma with being a parent. I'm going to tell you, you saw pictures of my kids. One of the hardest challenges, and maybe this will help you have grace on your parents. If nothing else, love them, love them, love them. One of the hardest challenges with raising two kids is every day I see my strengths in them, and every day I see my weaknesses. I'm far from perfect. I don't know what you see when you look at me now, but I'm far from perfect. I fall short all the time. And I know even in raising my kids, I make mistakes often. I'm so grateful that they love me no matter what. They give me grace no matter what. They forgive me no matter what. They give me hugs and the whole 9 yards no matter what. I know I don't deserve them because I fall short more than they realize. And my 6-year-old especially does not hesitate in telling me when I mess up. But that's one of the challenges in raising kids. That's one of the challenges and being a leader in a congregation, right? We're teaching you things that I've shared even throughout this class. I'm still working on myself. But I have to show you and teach you Christ, even though I know I fall short. So realistically, you're right. Your parents are trying to raise you even though they don't have it all figured out. But that's the call that we have. And sometimes in that process, we actually need you to help us to help you. Help us help you. Y'all get the picture. You know what I mean? But I hope you guys enjoyed this class. Thank you all for your participation and your questions. We had a great time with you. You're dismissed now.